Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Genetic Alliance's webinar series. My name is James O'Leary. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer with Genetic Alliance, and I'm very happy to be here with you today. The webinar today is titled Understanding Great Leadership Using the Filter of Secure Attachment, and this session is part two of attachment theory webinars associated with Genetic Alliance's 25th anniversary celebration and leading up to one of our major 25th anniversary events, the Attachment Conference. Jean Early, our speaker for today, will talk more about that and the context for the call. Jean is a council member at Genetic Alliance and a very accomplished individual who has really been a catalyst for transformation in Genetic Alliance's culture over the years. He's worked with many other organizations, including being the co-founder of Genomic Health, and is very involved with an organization called Leaders Quest. In addition, he has a PhD in Leadership and Organizational Development and wrote a book titled Leadership Expectations, How Executive Expectations Are Created and Used in a Nonprofit Setting. As a reminder, for today's call, you can ask questions using the panel on the right-hand side of the screen. You can send those in at any time during the call. We'll definitely have a question and answer session at the end, but if there are relevant questions, I will ask them at the end of the slide. Also, as a reminder, today's webinar is recorded, and we will post that on our website at geneticalliance.org/webinars in about a week's time. So you can always go back, check back up on the slides on what's been said, or refer other people if you enjoyed the webinar. So with that, I do want to transfer things over to Jean so we can get things started. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jean. And I will let you know when we can see your slides.
Okay. Great. And let's see. Here we go.
Okay, great. We can see them.
Okay. Thanks, James. It's a delight to be here and to be participating in the whole series of events that go with the Attachment Conference and the various things that we are having this year as Genetic Alliance's 25th year celebration. On the slide, the context for the webinar, I want to just give you a bit of background as to how it's come about and where the webinar fits into the larger flow of activities for the 25th year celebration. The first event in the celebration is the Attachment Conference itself. That's the 31st of March through the 2nd of April. It's going to be in Harrisonburg, Virginia, in collaboration with Eastern Mennonite University. I think it's going to be a fabulous time. Genetic Alliance has been invited to develop a thread throughout the conference in which we will have a leadership day, a leadership workshop, on Thursday the 31st, and the conference itself begins at evening of March 31st. It goes all day Friday and then Saturday through midday. The speakers we have are world-class speakers. Sue Johnson, Dan Siegel, John Paul Lederach, Jim Cohen, Nancy Murphy. These are people who are studying attachment and issues related to attachment and integrating them into a comprehensive view of how we live and work together as human beings, with a particular emphasis on emotion as a significant factor in what we do and how we do what we do. So that conference, this webinar is part of the preparation for that. As James said, it will be archived so that it will become a resource in our resource repository. We also have a blog, which I'll talk a bit about in a minute. And we have the second event, which is the summer conference, 23rd to 26th of June. It's in Bethesda, Maryland, and it's always a fabulous conference. And in the last couple of years, we have been integrating our leadership model, not only in the leadership day, which is a full-day workshop, but also throughout the conference, because we're recognizing the value of what we're experiencing as an organization and wanting to share it more broadly. And these webinars are part of that desire to share what we've discovered and improve the functioning of organizations and affect systems. The third event in this year's celebration is the 25th anniversary gala. It's the 22nd of September. It's going to be a fabulous gathering together at the National Geographic. We're going to honor honor innovation. We recognize that Genetic Alliance has become a major innovator in the field of health, particularly health through genetics. And we've initiated many, many projects and opportunities and tools for improving health of individuals and families and systems. So that's a very brief kind of overview of the 25th year. We also want to kind of move on and talk a bit more about this webinar and focus on culture. One of the things that we have discovered is that culture is a strategic driver of success. And I think James and other members of the staff at Genetic Alliance can attest to the evolution of the culture at Genetic Alliance as being a major influence in the tremendous success that we've had over the last few years, and also the anticipation of what is to come. I think that's one of the really powerful things. If you look at some business leaders, for example, Larry Bossidy and Ram Charan, who wrote the book Execution. It's a very well-received business book. They quote Dick Browning, and he says the culture of a company is the behavior of its leaders, and you change the culture of a company by changing the mindset and behavior of its leaders. And we found this to be true at Genetic Alliance. This is very much a true statement for us. Also, just want to recognize that leadership operates at every level of culture. Leadership certainly operates at the level of the council in Genetic Alliance. It also operates at the level of CEO with Sharon Terry, senior management team, and, in fact, every single person in the organization. And we expect that. We expect to find leadership, and we do find leadership coming from each and every person. And that has been a major influence in terms of shaping the culture. I think what I'd like to do is just share a little bit of my story and kind of personalize it a bit to give you a sense of, why does anyone get excited about something or passionate about something? And for myself, I've been interested in, passionate for leadership and organizational development. It seems to me my whole life. But of course, it's evolved over time. And if I go back and I look, historically, how does that relate, if you will, to attachment theory and practice? And I would go back to the age of 12 when, unfortunately, my dad died. And as I've discovered in studying attachment literature, trauma like that has a profound effect on the attachment bond that people have, in this case that I had with my dad and also with my family. And that trauma took me many, many years to overcome. But the other effect of it, I would say, is that it activated in me what might be called an insecure attachment identity, particularly a preoccupied anxious one. And we'll get a bit more into the four types of identity associated with attachment. But for me, what that effectively did as a very young child and kind of preteen, if you will, was that it made me, I'd say, exceedingly anxious, and that at the same time I wanted to get close to people. I wanted approval. I wanted recognition from other people, teachers and coaches and students, fellow students and peers. I was highly sensitive to what other people thought or did or how they responded to me. And that kind of high level of emotional engagement is called hyperactivating strategy. Trying to constantly get that sense of trust and deep rapport with attachment figures, which unfortunately I think was, particularly in those early years, was very, very difficult for me to do. And so it became somewhat of a challenge that I couldn't really answer for what I wanted, and I would say that I made negative evaluations of other people, particularly authority figures, and that especially within the case of male authority figures. So, and I would say also that I had natural talents around leadership. So you kind of put all that together, and I'd say you get a bit of a mess. Fortunately, I did make this discovery, which is that actually I'm responsible for my internal world and the choices that I make. That was a profound shift for me, that from thinking that other people were responsible for all this to the fact that I was responsible. And I realized that I could actually begin to get healed if I paid attention to it. And so that healing journey is something that we in Genetic Alliance are very much aware of as part of the culture, and creating a space that where that's possible for everyone through openness and truth-telling and various other things. Again, I'll talk about that in a bit. But I would say that I made a decision along the way that if I was going to have a dad, I needed to, that would have to be my stepdad. And so I made a conscious decision to invest myself in relationship with him. And because of that decision, and over a number of years, he and I grew closer and closer and closer. And he actually became a reference for me as a secure attachment figure that I could use. And I recognized the power of that decision began to influence other decisions that I was making about myself and about my own leadership. And so that progressively, my self-image improves, strategies for dealing with anxiety improved, and I would say I began to grow as a leader. Another major breakthrough was this whole discovery of the process of identification, which is basically, it says, if I see something in another person, I can ask the question, how is that true for me? And I can get an answer, because even though the content might not be the same, the structure of it is very much the same within all of us. And what it does is it removes blaming, and it removes judgment, and it creates a bridge for deep communication and rapport. And so that became self-reinforcing, and just was such a benefit to me. And that when I began working with Genetic Alliance, which was in 2003, I discovered this kind of wonderful opportunity that effectively Sharon Terry, who is the CEO, said, here's the learning lab. Let's get to it. And so the board at the time and the senior management and everybody who was involved said, yeah, it was not easy, and it wasn't always without bumps, but there was a commitment from the top to actually proceed and to discover the processes by which really significant impactful leadership could be made manifest, and also how we could affect the culture, which I would say we have done. So that's a bit about me, and it's a bit about why I'm really passionate about this topic and how I expect to see it influence the model that we've been developing over these years in leadership, and the influence that Genetic Alliance has been able to bring in the world. So I'll move on a bit. I'll also leave that open to James if he wants to jump in at any point with regard to questions or whatever.
Great. Thank you, James. And, just one thought as you shared that everyone jumped in, I think there was a really strong recognition among all the people at Genetic Alliance, including the council, that a lot of our work centers on novel and non-traditional partnerships. And if we can't understand ourselves and how we relate to others, how can we expect others to take that step? And I think that was a big part of kind of our investment, because that's really what this took, was a strong investment from each individual. That was the impetus for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. Okay. So we talk a bit now about attachment theory. What is it? One of the things that I would recommend, if you've not had a chance to hear Anne-Marie Early's webinar, that you go into the archive and check that out. It was entitled Application of Attachment Theory, Will You Be There When I Really Need You? This is very much a family affair. Anne-Marie is my daughter-in-law, and Christian, our son, is also involved in the conference at Eastern Mennonite. So I've been blessed with the benefit of both of them being very much invested in this whole theory as well, and that actually has been my introduction to it. And I highly recommend her webinar. and as a resource for understanding the basics of attachment theory and practice. So what I'll do is I'll just go quickly over that. The way that I understand it is attachment theory is really a theory about relationship, that we are social beings, that we are neurologically, biologically, physiologically created to have relationships and to live in social settings. And that, as Dan Siegel talks about, and he will be one of the speakers at the attachment conference in his book called Mindsight, that our mind is actually social, and that it's our mind is what regulates energy and information flow. And that's not just internal to us, that is actually between us and others. And neuroscientists have been actually developing research protocols that have begun to show the effect on the brain of this kind of understanding. So it's a theory of relationships. Secondly, I would say that it's especially these relationships relate to anxiety-producing situations such as crisis, distress, isolation, those kinds of things, where the attachment bond is really critical. And that bond is obviously originated in childhood between a child and their caregiver, and it could be multiple caregivers that they create attachment bonds with, but that extends throughout the whole of life. And so one of the things we recognize is that leaders become attachment figures. And if they are secure attachment figures, they actually create safety for people to become all they're meant to be and all they're capable of being in an organizational setting. One of the things that we recognize about attachment theory is that in situations of crisis or distress, everyone has their own ways of reducing anxiety. And these are called attachment styles, and we'll talk a bit about those in a bit. And there are secure attachment styles and insecure ones. Secure ones are, kind of what we would desire. Insecure ones, there are a variety of ways in which people attempt to create that sense of what's called a safe haven and a secure base within an attachment figure. Not always successful and can produce dysfunctionality. So being able to understand those things has helped us at Genetic Alliance to actually begin to address some of the issues that get raised when in every setting there always the possibility of anxiety being produced. So how do we deal with it? And then hypothesizing behavioral styles, attempting to relieve the anxiety created in these contexts. So these behavioral styles are, as I was mentioning, attachment styles, and we'll talk more in just a bit. And then one of the things that we've recognized is that these styles and identities actually operate within and between different levels. So at the psychological level, what we're talking about is attachment identity itself. And the question that goes with that is, am I secure enough in myself as one with resources and strategies to support myself through a crisis or a distressing experience? So that's really the personal, and we recognize that as we transform ourselves as leaders, that we have tremendous impact on those around us in creating a secure organizational culture. So one of the roles of the leader is, I think, to transform themselves and to move increasingly into a secure attachment identity. The second level that we recognize is the social, and that relates to the relationship piece, especially attachment figures in my life or in the life of other people. And those are people who I can depend on and that I would seek out as a safe haven and a secure base. Safe haven being when I'm anxious, who do I go to and what do I go to? And the secure base is that safety that allows me to go and explore and be creative and productive. And so that's one side of it. The other side of it is the relationship with myself as an attachment figure for others. And as I increasingly become secure as an attachment figure, I create that security for others, and it releases them and the energy that they have to bring to the organization. The third level is the communal, and that really integrates multiple relationships, which form a culture. And that addresses the question, which I think is a profound question. Is this place, this community, this organization a safe haven and a secure base in which I can trust that I'll be known for who I am, that my voice will be heard as authentic, and that my contributions will be valued? I mean, this, I think, is what we all want. We want it in our families. We want it in the places where we work. We want it in our local communities. We want it in our nation. We want it in the world. It's really a powerful thing, and it orients to the idea of systems, which at Genetic Alliance we're very big on, is understanding how systems operate, how we can influence systems, and how we can transform systems, beginning with ourselves but extending to the social and the communal. And then the fourth level is the spiritual, which we increasingly recognize. That's that level that supports the larger sense of my presence in the world. You can call it God, you can call it a higher power, you can call it the ground of being. In some way, it's that which goes beyond the simple human connection and provides a source of security for those who choose to think of it in those ways and feel it in those ways. So that I'm going to move on to the next, but give some space for you, James, if there are things that you want to put in at this point.
No, not at this point. Thank you.
Okay. Then we'll talk about presuppositions about leaders and leadership. The first one is that leaders' identity and behavioral expressions of that identity shape the culture of the organization at every level. This is one of the comments that I made right at the beginning about the ways in which business leaders particularly, but I would say just about everyone, recognizes the impact of leaders and at multiple levels. And one of the quotes that sticks out in my mind regularly is that it comes from Steve Ballmer, who is the CEO of Microsoft. And he says that culture in a company can drive success or failure. It's not the only factor, but it's the one thing that he tries to shape every day with as many employees as he can. And I think, wow, that's exactly right. It's a daily task that we need to engage in. Another person to think about is Steve Jobs. If you think about the impact that his vision and personality and drive have had at Apple, just an amazing story there of a computer company began a garage that has turned into a major media company that's having a profound effect in terms of shaping global culture. And any of you who know people who work there or are a Mac user yourself, you'll certainly identify with the power that company has in the world today and the influence that Steve Jobs has brought to it. And one of the things that I would say about that is that we increasingly live in a networked world. Genetic Alliance has over 10,000 organizations that it has identified its networked with. And over 1,200 of those are patient advocacy organizations. So we recognize that we live in a networked world. And in that kind of world, it's not so much about the content, but it's much more about the process by which people relate to each other. So in other words, this is beginning to talk, and we'll talk more as well, about the relationship between leadership, organization, and attachment. That attachment is a theory of relationship. It begins to give us ways of thinking about how we function in the networks in which we live and work and play as well, for that matter. Then the second one is that when a leader changes or transforms, the culture will change or transform. And I think there's a great example. Everybody's familiar with Walmart, I would expect. And Walmart, interestingly enough, was having tremendous PR problems and was not getting good press at all. And kind of about that same time, Lee Scott, who was at that time the CEO, really challenged the board of Walmart with regard to sustainability and the whole idea of going green. And he and they recognized that from a business standpoint, this was a way that Walmart could do better business and become a better citizen. So that in the year 2005, they figured out, what can we do? And they began, and it's, as so many times, it's one person, and this is an example of leadership that's not the CEO, but somebody who is down the chain a bit. There was one executive who took on a project, which was to reduce the packaging in a Walmart branded toy. And what they realized was that single change eliminated 215 shipping containers. And then it just became an obvious thing for them to do. Well, this was led by Lee Scott. I mean, he changed. He changed how he thought. He changed through influencing the board. The board changed through influencing their strategic decision making, and Walmart changed. And you understand how large Walmart is, and a change of that magnitude has tremendous impact. So it ripples through the whole system when you can get congruence around that kind of change, and that's very much what we're interested in doing in Genetic Alliance in the whole area of health. It's not just patient advocacy, as much as we value that, and it is that. It's also the whole system of health. It has to do with policy. It has to do with research. It has to do with innovation, like James was talking about a bit earlier. It's many different dimensions, many different types of roles, many different people involved, and we recognize that we can be a catalyst for that kind of transformation in the area of health and beyond, potentially. The third presupposition there, leaders' relationships with others systemically influence the whole. And we realize, again, that as we make those changes, as we create a secure culture, we can invite people who are not employees or staff or members of the organization. We can invite them into spaces where they realize they have more resources available to them to make a difference in the world than they realize. And part of that's through networking, part of that's through relationship, collaboration. That it begins with the change in mindset, and so that's very much what we're committed to. Okay, I'm going to go to the next one, James. Give you another chance to jump in if you have something you want to add.
No, I think just that Genetic Alliance, it's this idea of everyone can be a leader, and almost part of the culture change is creating, resources, access to leadership development resources, access to kind of organizational examples of how we take this commitment seriously, kind of leaders within the organization leading through their weakness, being open about their process and their thinking around these types of topics that Gene's approaching. And I think we'll have more time later on in the call to talk about some specific concrete activities that leaders and organizations can engage in to start to make some of this change.
Yeah, that's great. Also, I'm just reminded that for those of you who are listening, feel free to type in your questions. I know that we have some questions, and we love questions because that's one of the ways that we learn together is to ask great questions. So I'm totally up for more of those. So next we are going to talk about presuppositions about attachment theory in the context of leadership. Just very quickly, it's once again recognize that attachment theory is a theory of relationships specifically in the context of crisis, distress, isolation, those kinds of things where anxiety is high. And what we recognize is every leader is faced with this. I've worked with a very significant leader who I would say has a secure attachment identity. And what is significant about this person is that every so often we have the conversation where they talk about how they feel alone and how they're faced with really tough decisions that have impact with regard to their relationships with their employees and with their customers, and that they experience that it's very few people actually understand the process. Other CEOs do understand it, and there's a bit of sharing that goes on there, but on a day-to-day basis, there's there is not the same kind of support as maybe others get. And with that, it comes real emotional challenges. So that's at a top level, but it's true for all of us every day. Life has its challenges, and it creates difficulties. And to the degree that we do not have a secure attachment identity, we will experience anxiety. So that anxiety manifests itself in behavior, and in responses to it manifest in behavioral styles, which are called attachment styles. And these are there are four basic styles, which are the behavioral expressions of the core identities. And just want to talk a little bit about what those are and how they function. I think with regard to secure attachment, this is kind of the goal. This is the outcome that we all would like to kind of move ourselves to and to be more actively involved in. And secure identity, people who have that, they express greater satisfaction with their relationships. They tend to be more revealing in self-disclosure. They have higher emotional intelligence and expressiveness. They tend to have more strategies for coping with conflict, and they tend to perceive support from those around them more than people who have insecure styles. And one of the things that Sue Johnson, who's going to be one of the speakers at the attachment conference, says is that a healthy relationship is a secure attachment bond. So healthy relationships in organizations have to do with the ability to create this kind of openness that James was talking about, and to be able to lead from vulnerability and weakness, and to be able to recognize through that process of identification what's true in others that is also true in oneself, and through that identification to actually build strong bridges to understand one another and to release energy for creativity and productivity. Preoccupied anxious is another style. It's one that I spoke about with regard to myself in my early years, and I would say that I see myself as having moved from that. I'm still working on developing strategies for secure, but that you tend to have, as a preoccupied anxious, you tend to have a less positive view of yourself and a more positive view of other people, and so there's this constant seeking of approval and responsiveness, and there is some doubt in that style about your own individual worth. And there are times where you can find yourself blaming other people for their lack of responsiveness. And this is one of those places where identification is so helpful, because it helps to remove that blame and to give you a much clearer view of who the other person is. In terms of the dismissive avoidant, these are the people who are very task-oriented. They tend to be extremely independent. They're not comfortable with close emotional relationships. They want to feel self-sufficient. They want to do it themselves. They don't need help, but they don't want help. They prefer not to depend on other people. There's a bit of this sense of self-sufficiency and invulnerability, so to speak. John Bowlby, who's the father of attachment theory, called him compulsive self-reliance, denying the need for close relationships. So you kind of get a sense of that. These can be very productive leaders, but they do not create an emotional environment organization that invite the full participation of those people that work with them. So there are some problems with it, even though they can be highly successful in leading organizations. And then there's the fearful avoidant, and these are people who tend to be uncomfortable with getting too close to others. They find it difficult to trust others very, very much, or certainly completely. They worry that they may be hurt if they allow themselves to get too close to others. They don't trust the intentions of their partners and colleagues. So it makes it quite challenging to work with. But what we recognize is that every organization has people with all of these types of styles. And so at the leadership level, what we our challenge to do is to create a secure attachment culture, and that begins with ourselves, begins with the leader and with the senior team to actually create an environment where this is possible, that people with different attachment styles can earn security. And earn security means that they have lived experience with their leaders, with their significant attachment figures, that when they experience anxiety, that they can go to that person or they can be part of that organization in which they experience safety of the safe haven, and they also experience that secure base, that sense that I can touch my leader, and I can discover what is going to allow me to kind of go out, explore, be creative, productive, and such like that. So that's about that. Just wondering, James, if there's anything else you want to add on that?
No questions right now.
Okay. So next we want to talk about leadership and attachment, and what is the relationship between those two. For one, a leader's movement from insecure to secure attachment identity with resulting behavior, it begins to change a culture. And I've said this a number of times now, and I think it's an important distinction to continue to come back to, because leaders have this kind of influence. And one example that I think is a fabulous example is what Sharon Terry, who's the CEO of Genetic Alliance, has done. Is she's consistently understood that while Genetic Alliance is about patient advocacy, and it is about public policy, and it is about research, and it is about finding treatments for genetic diseases, it is also about leadership, and it is about making a difference in the world in a very broad sense, and creating an environment, not just in the organization, but in the broader world, of what can be seen, what can be done. So she's a good example of that. Encourage those of you who are familiar with Genetic Alliance to come to the Attachment Conference, come to the summer conference, and kind of get more hands-on experience with what Sharon and the senior team at the council have created in Genetic Alliance. Then the second point, when the executive leader and the leadership team develop a secure attachment identity, the organization has the beginning of a secure attachment culture. We talked a bit about this before. It's when people at every level feel free to share their concerns, share their interests, talk about ideas. One of the great organizations that I'm aware of and spent some time visiting when I was in Silicon Valley is Google. And you may have heard that 20% of a Google employee's time is free time to explore and experiment with possibilities. And one of the interesting things for me has been their recent work called the Art Project, the Google Art Project, where they've gone to museums around the world and had really great high resolution photographs of great works of art. This came out of that 20% of time, and it comes out of the openness that says we trust you to use that time productively, and that kind of trust and that kind of safety, that's a culture that lends itself towards innovation, towards creativity, towards new things. And that's one of the things in Genetic Alliance that we've been very committed to doing, is to creating that kind of culture. Also, number 3 there, then a secure attachment culture creates the conditions for individual and organizational transformation. We're very big on transformation and going, this begins with the individual, but it also is social. It is how people interact with one another, whether that be in teams doing projects, or whether that just be walking into the office and having a cup of coffee together, and things happen. Creating that engaged environment is really important. Okay, we'll move on a bit. Anything, James?
No.
Okay. Characteristics of a leader with a secure attachment identity. Well, this, I think, is the beginning of creating an internal picture of what do I move toward if I want to be have a secure attachment identity. First is that have a congruent self-definition that I'm secure in myself and in relation to others. And that congruence means that you know, what I say to myself, the kind of self-image I have, how I feel about myself, all those line up with these characteristics of secure attachment identity. Secondly, that such a leader knows who to seek out for security in times of their own distress or need. We are social beings, and we do have the need for one another. And it's one of the things we find in Genetic Alliance, that we need one another, and we look forward to working with one another for that very reason. Then is there for others, that a leader would be there for others in times of distress, need, or crisis, and actively work to repair any relationship ruptures that occur. So one of the things important in attachment theory is that ruptures do occur, you know, violations occur in relationship, but it's what you do about it that's important. And so that's a really significant aspect of a secure attachment identity. Talked a bit about safe havens and secure bases. Again, that's where you feel that whatever is happening in your life, there's a safe place to be, and that could be, you know, contextually that could be in the organization, you know, and more broadly speaking, it could be in your family, it could be in a relationship with close friends, and in other settings. And the secure bases is that security to go out from and to be created. Also, a leader like this demonstrates trustworthiness across contexts, including difficult ones, and particularly making those tough decisions. As I was talking about this CEO that I worked with, very tough decisions when you're at the top of an organization and all the way through the organization. They're constantly having to face choices. And being able to make those in a gracious way, in a way that keeps the environment safe, is very significant. Also, one thing Sue Johnson talks about is that a secure attachment identity means that a person is accessible, they're responsive, and they're engaged. And I say in appropriate relationships, in an organizational setting, there clearly there are appropriate ways to be engaged, and so to learn how to do that well is important. And finally, that such a leader encourages followers to take responsibility for their work and express their personal passion. That personal responsibility and passion is very significant. And it's one of the things I would say that characterizes Genetic Alliance at this stage of its life and career. So I'm ready to move on. James, do you want to add to that?
Sure. So I think that this is a really important slide for Genetic Alliance, because all of these things, I think, can be very easy to say, but very hard to kind of institutionalize, to even, you know, take within oneself and act upon. But I think these are some of the areas where we've seen the biggest growth at Genetic Alliance. And one really good concrete example of this is in leaving. So whether that means people, you know, planning ahead of time for going to school or transitioning to new and different roles outside the organization, or even when things aren't a fit. So that can be an extremely traumatic time for an organization, you know, whether the person is leaving through choice or not. And these are something that every organization deals with. I've seen a dramatic change in that here, because having that openness to help people plan, help move into their best roles for them, and make the biggest impact they can in the world, has really transformed how we handle and hold ourselves in general, how we, you know, view our network, not just as within the organization, and also how each person can bring their learning that comes with leaving and share it with the rest of the staff. You know, I've heard the phrase before, you know, you have the most to share, the most insight, you know, in the first 2 weeks at an organization and the last 2 weeks. I think that's really true, but many times that learning gets lost. This type of leadership allows each individual to share that learning, and that's been a big part of but I've seen as an outcome from this change in culture.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we've seen both. We've had both the good and not so good ways in which that's happened, and of course, you have to deal with all of that. We also have had to deal with that at the council level, where there have been some tough decisions around direction of the organization, and so having a secure attachment identity means that you have to deal with that, but you have to deal with that in a very positive way and encouraging way, and as James was saying, to focus on what's best for the whole, what's best for the whole of the organization, what's best for the individuals involved, what's best for the relational dynamics. That's a really important distinction. Okay, let's go on just quickly. What is the value of attachment theory in practice for the community? I'll just go through this quickly. I think there's a value as a framework of understanding of our relationships. There's new language, there's new vocabulary, and there's new concepts that we've introduced and are using. Things like attachment figure, things like attachment injury, things like the working model, the internal representation of how you respond when your when your behavioral attachment system is activated. Then there are practices. That's the practical side of things that begins to emerge. That's individual leadership development. That's, particularly on the advocacy side, couples who have, for example, have a child who's chronically ill, being able to have access to attachment related therapy like Sue Johnson does, amazing gift. She's done work with the chronically ill, and at the conference she'll talk about this with us. About how do we address those kinds of injuries that happen and restore the relationship in order to serve the whole of the family. So, that's another one. And then we've talked about organization and culture a bit there. So I think that's important. And then finally, it's contribution to addressing that question of what's at stake. And we know that in the work that we do, what's at stake are the lives of loved ones. It's also the relationships with family members and others who are affected, who may not be the ones who are ill, but the family system's affected, the larger systems are affected. And then, of course, there are communities, advocacy groups who've created foundations, and so there are communities around these diseases helping one another to be supported and to be proactive in looking for treatments and ideally at some point, hopefully looking for cures. But that's a whole dimension that is at stake and that attachment can speak to. So just kind of moving quickly along, I want to talk a bit about developing a secure attachment identity as a leader. This clearly is just an outline. There's a lot of subtlety to it, but it's just to say there's a way to do this. One of those ways would be that you identify your type of attachment identity. Is it secure or insecure? If it's insecure, then identify the characteristics of the secure identity, some of which we just mentioned, and begin to apply them to yourself. And then you find out what resources you need in order to change your working model, and that is how do you respond to get the kind of attachment bond that you need when you're in the midst of anxiety. And how do you change that model from an insecure model to a secure model? I've just listed a couple of things here. One is external support. Another is actually changing your core beliefs. Another is accessing reference experiences of that secure attachment event where things, oh, right, this is safe, this is a secure base, and then begin to expand it out. And then using reinforcing experiences of secure attachment. One of the ways to do that is like we've done in Genetic Alliance in the council, where the council process actually has created a secure culture within the council. And in our council and staff retreats, we've extended it to the whole of the organization. So just an example there. And then test congruence of your internally represented working model. And keep working to achieve that congruence. So that means everything is what you see, what you say to yourself, how you feel about it. all of that lines up with being secure. And not to say it's perfect, and not to say that you'll always be able to do that easily, but just with that identity, you will understand that you have strategies for dealing with stress, dealing with anxiety, self-soothing, and doing the things that will enable you to be fully present as you need to be. And then, of course, to continually develop new processes. This is the whole idea that we're learners and we're living in a learning environment, a learning culture, and to commit to that. Recognizing the time, just move on a bit and talk about some organizational characteristics of a secure attachment culture, which is the result of leaders developing and expressing that secure attachment identity. Some of the ones that we recognize in Genetic Alliance are openness, truth-telling, the release of energy, which has been a powerful expression for us, exploration and innovation. We're a very innovative organization, and I think that's in large part due to the increasing security that we are creating for ourselves. Creativity and productivity. These are just characteristics that we see have grown in Genetic Alliance, and we invite others to explore that as well. One more kind of related, organizational practices, and I want to just say a bit about this. These are things that we've developed that I think help contribute to a secure attachment culture. The whole concept of opening and holding space. This is really well developed in a methodology called open space technology that was developed by Harrison Owen. We've adapted it and apply it on a daily basis, and really it's organized around asking questions. So whenever we start a council meeting, for example, we ask one another, where are you now? Very open-ended question. And one of the things we recognize is first line principle, we start and we don't always know what we're going to say, but we're giving each other permission to start like writer through, just write your first paragraph and don't worry about what you're saying, just to get the thinking and the intuition flowing. Because we trust one another that we will get to the core of whatever the topic that needs to be addressed is. And that relates to this third point, which is emergence. That what needs to emerge will emerge if we are sensitive and paying attention and looking and listening for it, which is that has to do with where do you put your attention. Identification, I've spoken a bit about. That's the identification question is, how is what I see in you true of me? And that can be, how is what I admire about you true in myself? And it could also be, how is what I'm judging or saying I don't really like that about you true about myself? And both of those are ways of building up individuals in relationships and culture. The yes and culture is also a piece of what we do, and that is all about helping people to understand that we build together, we build on one another, and we look forward to being able to take some part of what the other person is saying or offering and to offer it, and then to contribute beyond that. The we culture is also that's all about inclusion, that we belong and that we speak for one another and with one another toward a common purpose. It's easy to say, it's challenging to do. And then collaboration. It's like our success, your success is my success. Your problem is my problem. That kind of mentality, that working together, and that we can't do it alone. The challenges are too big for us. So that's that. And then the last, just in conclusion, I'd just say attachment theory and practice really has some unique contributions to both leadership and to organizational development. That we're offering a variety of resources for you to learn more about that theory and practice. I've put links on the very first page that I talked about. Our attachment conference, there's a blog. I really encourage you to go to that. We're trying to create resources in that way that you can learn about it. Also on our website, there are attachment resources and references to the speakers at this upcoming conference, books, again of the webinars, both Anne-Marie's and my own. And then the summer conference. We'll be doing more of this in the summer conference, particularly in the leadership phase, but also throughout the whole of it. Just to say that we've really been working to create and sustain a secure attachment culture, and it's really for a couple of purposes. One is to serve you, and the other is to offer context for you to explore and to create and contribute. So this is about us, and it's about you. It's a both and thing. And so we really would love to hear from you, want to know how you might want to be further involved, and any contributions that you have to make to us. We would love to hear about. And then finally, just to say, this will be archived, but here are some resources. All of these people except for the second one will be at the conference, and you have a chance to see that. Again, that conference is the 31st of March through the 2nd of April this year, 2011, in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And there's lots of information about that on our website. That's what I have for today. James, I know we're close to time, and I don't know if we want to take one or two of those questions, or if we just want to close for now.
Sure. If anyone has any additional questions as well, please still send them, and we can forward them on to Gene. Just one quick question, Gene, which is, Genetic Alliance, as you mentioned, didn't start by studying attachment theory, but rather focused on the principles. For someone that is looking to get started with this, I know that you had said, start with yourself, absolutely. What other, practically speaking, what should people do? What should people start with? What resources? What approach? Are there, activities that would be good to kind of broach the subject within an organization? How would you approach this?
Well, I think everybody's different in how they function and how they learn. What I would suggest is that you get Sue Johnson's book called Hold Me Tight. It's very good read. It's easy to read. It comes from a therapeutic side. There's actually not been a book out on leadership and attachment, which somebody needs to write that book. But Hold Me Tight really gives you a good introduction to the theory and practice. And I think that it's beginning to just get an understanding of what it's all about. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is that Genetic Alliance has a fair amount of experience now. A number of us in Genetic Alliance have been using these processes and tools for a number of years, and so we have some experience of that. So I'd say being in touch with some of us, talking about it, coming to the conferences, and really kind of educating yourself with regard to it would be a really great way to go about it. And then it's like any other thing of this sort, it takes a commitment of time and energy and investment. And so one of the things that I'm pleased about is that we do have some video resources on our website, and I think those are very helpful as well. So I guess the starting point is really to begin to do that, or to talk to one of us.
Great. Well, I want to thank you very much, Gene, for joining us today. This has been a great session. I think it's just the kickoff for a lot more activities to come.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, our pleasure. I do want to remind people that in addition to the kind of attachment conference and attachment events, there are a number of other 25th anniversary events, which Gene mentioned, that you can find out more information on our website. In addition, we do have a few more webinars coming up soon. The next one is Family Health History of Patient Education Toolkit, the Health Center Program Awards, which is an awards program that we recently announced that organizations can apply to integrate family health history materials within HRSA-supported health centers. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up on the website, geneticalalliance.org/webinars, and that session is actually tomorrow from noon to 1 p.m. So at this point, I just want to thank not only Jean, but also all of our participants, and thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you on future webinars.